All right, everybody, what's going on? Kellen here. And I just want to shed light, hopefully not to disrespect anybody, because where you fellowship is where you choose the fellowship. Same with me in this country where it's the home of the free, land of the brave, and all that good stuff folks like to say around this time. But had to talk about us family having to walk out of church when we heard nationalism being preached at a huge church here in Florida, Christ Fellowship Church. And, this church, it was so convenient to get to where we live. And at least one of my children were enjoying themselves. But you have to find what's feeding you. And this sermon, Is America a Christian Nation, was one that I just had to say, you know what, that's it. And it wasn't just me. Even my oldest and even my wife, they got up and were like, you know what, this is not Jesus. Nationalism, no matter where you're at, does not need to be preached. Governments are wicked. You can see that throughout history. Governments are going to do what governments do, and it's not going to be based on the scriptures. Doesn't matter if it's in this country or beyond, or if it's Christians, or if it's any other religion. But is America a Christian nation? No. We have same-sex marriage and everything else that is condoned and lawful and legal. How is that in the scriptures? You don't find it. You can't find it. And that's all that we're talking about. We're not talking about opinion. And I'm going to just play the beginning of this because I don't want any copyright strikes on this civil conversation. But it's to let people know, if something in a place is not feeding you, it is okay, especially when you are in the home of the free, that you can leave at any time, especially if you are a dual citizen, a multinational, or just a free thinker, and you say, you know what, I'm a citizen of the world. I don't know if you guys can see, but I have all the flags. I got the red, white, and blue. I got the Sierra Leone, the Cameroon, the Mexican flag. I'm born in America, so I can say what I want to say in this country, and it's okay. And guess what? If you don't agree, it's okay. If you do agree, that's okay. You don't have to say anything. This is not something meant to go viral. It's just to have a conversation and have people think, because this, first of all, this image in the classroom, great production that the church has. But it can kind of come off, a little Netflixy, like it's a movie. I don't know if it's, the Purge or what, but I'm going to talk my talk and you guys can believe what you want to believe. But just play this beginning. He's saying how he grew up like I did in a classroom just like this, where they force you to salute a flag right before they tell you how slavery and taking over, other nations. And if you ever read Economic Hitman, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, it'll really make you say, wait, hold on, how is this a Christian nation? Okay. And what we do in America is we find one little thing that someone doesn't like to say, and we try to go against that and try to go against them. But again, at the end of the day, I'm just stating my opinion. Call this my diary. He's talking about Eisenhower in 54. Now, if that's true, we have really failed, because growing up in school, and forget the racism that you hear. I was probably like the one black kid at one point, the only one, maybe it was two of us in California. And, we're listening to the pledge, and we're hearing about slavery every year. They had to pump down slavery. So think about if you were a minority, especially if you were black, and you have to pledge allegiance right before you hear Huckleberry Finn, Right before you hear Tom Sawyer say the N word, who knows how many times. You guys can ask Chat GDP how many times that was said, and every day. And if it's not Huckleberry Finn, if it's not Tom Sawyer, and these books are the books DeSantis, probably says, oh, these are good, these are must reads. But every day you have to hear that. Then you have to hear the history of your people started in slavery. And that's all you hear. That's all you hear over and over. And then you hear how, the Japanese were, or the Chinese were, in camps or building railroads. And I'm sorry, this is not what I would call a Christian nation. And just so we're clear, I find to be Christianity, which a lot of folks in mega churches would say, oh yeah, we're Christianity. I find that to be have racist undertones. I find it to be white supremacy, because if you ask them, a lot of times what their Jesus looks like, they're going to go to what you'll see, all through Europe. And the Bible, the scriptures never talk about it looking anything like Michelangelo's brother or any of the artists. So who drew Jesus. And you can't give Jesus with dreadlocks either, because you have to go straight from the scripture if you're going to go with the scripture. And Dwight Eisenhower, when he put that in, I'm sure he meant well. We're all doing the best that we can. And I know there'll be some people say, well, Dwight Eisenhower, his mom was said to be biracial. I hear you. And what does that have to do with, is America a Christian nation? The person who put it in the Bible, or the person who's preaching it? If your pastor is Black right now and they're preaching the same message, it's wrong. It's not based in the scripture. It's not going to help anybody come to any salvation. What it will do is probably have some Americans think that America is the greatest country in the world, and it's the only country in the world, which is just not true if you travel enough. But go do your Google research, because I'm going to teach you how to fish, and see how many Americans do not even have a passport. It's a shame, and they can afford it. See how many Americans don't travel. And then when you do travel, find out how many Americans don't even know simple geography. They go to countries and don't even know how to do a hola greeting. Or you go to an African country and you can't even say mambo jumbo, because you haven't taken the time. Patrice O'Neill, may he rest in power, he said, I go to other countries and I look at them like foreigners and expect them to speak English. And that was just him being a comedic genius. Not saying he was the pastor, but him being a comedic genius, saying how most Americans look. Most Americans are brainwashed the same way North Koreans are brainwashed, same way many people from, in this country who come from another country are brainwashed to think their country is good. And the only thing, the most sophisticated thing somebody has to say is, well, go back to that country. If somebody can afford to live wherever they want to live, and maybe even afford to live where you want to live, or where you want to live, not where you live, and could buy your house 10 times over, maybe you should just stop saying that. Figure out something else to say, because the complaint isn't that America is the worst country in the world. We're saying, is America a Christian nation? I'm simply saying no. I'm simply saying, look at the behavior. I'm simply saying, when that was put in 1954, how many lynchings were done to Black people alone, and other murders? It's going to be over 500, 600 easy. And then the most sophisticated, the person who feels like, oh, my father fought for this country, or this and that. Who's did it, right? Whose grandfather did it? That was what they did. They needed soldiers. A lot of them were drafted. It wasn't by choice. But a lot of times, people, when they say that, when you're talking to other people who have served, you run out of an argument. When you talk to other people who have sacrificed and maybe even done more for this country than what that service was, of guarding the poppy seeds in Afghanistan, or, going to Vietnam for whatever reasons, right? We found out Vietnam most Americans would say we should never have been there. Same way, we shouldn't be in the Middle East right now. And hopefully we don't end up in World War III, going to Europe, trying to fight Putin. But is America a Christian nation? No. And then you have people with their sophisticated, arguments, because they can't go to the scripture. And let's go to the scripture real quick before I give you any more just of why I think that. I can prove that the scripture, this is not the only verse, but I had it pulled up. The scriptures tell you, do not swear an oath at all. What do you think it is when you're pledging your allegiance? It's an oath. It's an oath, and your scripture tells you don't do it. Now, our scriptures tell us don't do a lot of things, and we all fall short of the glory of God. That also is in the scripture, but you cannot act like you're holier than thou. You can't act like you're more than American than anybody. And a lot of people online like to talk tough, and that's fine. You talk tough online. You don't do it in person. The people when you in person, at least what I've seen, are quite civil, because we can agree to disagree in this great country. And it's a great country compared to many. I've been to over 23 of them. It's a great country, but I also get to say where I want to be and when I want to be there. And let me just show you, for those of you who say, well, Reagan, because you guys always like to pull Reagan out. And for somebody who, I was a kid, a small one at that, when Reagan was, I've studied Reagan, and I haven't found much that I like out of him. Yeah, he was witty. Yeah, he was sharp, but he surely didn't care about my community. Check this excerpt out, just so you can hear how Reagan, talking to Nixon, calling African nations monkeys. This is stuff you can YouTube, but this is the Reagan that you love. And guess what? A lot of you nowadays who have a Black friend and Black family members, you still calling people monkeys and all type of derogatory names. See, I'm a semi-pro comedian, so I never get offended by you, because you never say it to our face. You found out what happened in, elementary and middle school and high school, what happens when you showed your true cards. And it's not everybody. True, it's not everybody. But the people that it is who, Reagan, listen to this real quick. Last night, I tell you to watch that thing on television, as I did. Reagan, to see those monkeys from those African countries, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes. And Nixon is laughing. This is why Black Americans do not have the same allegiance that those who were the colonizers, those who benefited. No, maybe your father wasn't rich and he was still poor and you're still poor, so you're still mad. But the fact is, you can't debate that you did not have the same, have to pull yourself up from your bootstraps as other people, Black people being one of them. Some immigrants being one of them. Some immigrants come over here with so much money, but there's a vast, probably majority who don't come that I know, and they've made their way through jobs, through business, and we need immigrants in this country. The day immigrants have to leave this country is the day that I got to tira la puerta and get out that door, because we need everybody here. This is a nice experiment, America, and hopefully it can keep going somewhat peaceful without people, again, read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, without people sabotaging other nations and, calling people monkeys and dogs and everything else. And you think you're better for what? Because you have bigger missiles? Because you're willing to play a dirtier game? This is a dirty game of politics, dirty game. And let me tell you, Americans, when you leave this country, you find out how smart you're not. You find out how your exposure has been very limited. Look, you can do a simple Google search. I did this already. Most Americans don't have a grasp on international affairs. You can see there's so much that Americans, and if you don't believe me, watch the old episodes of Jaywalking with Jay Leno. And that was Jay's way of showing how stupid Americans can be. Bill Maher is another one who's hit that right on nail on the head, how stupid Americans can be, because you believed everything that they told you and you didn't have any, you believe Santa Claus. You believed it. You really think, Halloween is something that is supposed to be about candy that America created. You think everything came out of America. I remember as a kid them showing us like, that kids had the advanced Marios coming from Japan. And it always made me think, like, we really have to think, people, and say, maybe I wasn't taught what I was taught, but this standing. And you can go watch some of this if you can stomach it. Is America a Christian nation? If you can stomach it, go ahead and watch it and come up with your own conclusion. But think, and don't be such in the purge, because that's where we're headed to. They've wanted to, decade ago, try to legalize prostitution. They've tried to, legalize everything that we used to be told was wrong is now right. And it's not to say that I'm perfect in any form of the way. Oh, I got so many flaws. I'll tell them all to you. But if we're going to preach and go to church and preach and teach, we should have it from the Bible. And when half of your sermon, if not more, is all about nationalism and patriotism, yes, the scriptures say, give to Caesar what is his. That ain't got nothing to do with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, that's talking about taxation and a whole bunch of other things that you probably missed the mark on. But that's the pseudo intellectual arguments, and you can't do that with me over here. And I'm just telling people, think, because this is not the only church, and it's not the only church that I've been to. And I can sit there because I can stomach it with Klansmen and skinheads and black supremacists too, and just listen and hear and say, this is really how people think. I wonder why. Because I'm always thinking, why do they think like this? What have they not been exposed to? Growing up in California in the way that I did, I was exposed to a lot of culture, and got to live with a lot of culture, and everybody has culture. A lot of times in America, we'll have immigrants try to say, oh, America doesn't have culture. And we got to slap that out. Are you kidding me? We run culture, especially Black Americans. Run culture. There is no Afro beats without that culture, but I can go on all day about that. But I'm just telling you, if something doesn't fit well in your spirit, you don't have to take the abuse. Some people, there were Black folk in this church, plenty of them. They serve and everything. They preach and everything. They're going to sit there because those are some of them, the happy-go-lucky, or, and they just get along and that's the problem. You just can't get along because nothing happens when you just get along. And someone like this, who I don't think he meant any negative will by it. I just think that it's exposure and nobody been able to tell you the real deal from a Black perspective. Because this type of pastor, he wants to expose you to some of that word. He wants he wants it to be a multicultural community in his community. I know that. Just like Pastor Judah did in Seattle. Just like Pastor Bracken did in Lubbock, Texas. Just like Pastor Geno Jennings, who has churches all over the world and doesn't get paid a salary. He says, get a job. But just like Joel Osteen, they want everybody. But who's just preaching out of that book and not giving that nationalism, not giving that opinion? Joel Osteen, what do they say, the cotton candy preacher? We don't know how many people have not killed themselves, how many people have turned their life around because of that. So the scriptures tell you, some folks, everyone will preach out of different motives and different things. That's cool, but you can't preach what's not in that book. Joel Osteen, and he's positive. If you only get one scripture that doesn't fit you, you can get up and go. You don't have to stay there, especially when these mega churches are making, millions on top of millions. And all I'm asking is, are they putting that back into the community into a way that you see an impact in people's lives? If they are, great. You know, people getting saved all over the world, right? That's what you're supposed to do. You're not doing, you're doing what you're supposed to do if you recall. And don't think your pastors, oh man, doing this business, there's not a perfect pastor like there's not a perfect person. And if we have to be perfect to give our opinion, then we all should shut up. But this is nationalism. Can't preach nationalism, can't preach Zionism. There's other things. I had prepared one more, just, you can go to gotquestions.org and you can go read this whole thing, and it has some scripture, and you can talk about and see in the history of nationalism being preached, and how, in Israel, you had to do this, you had to do that. That is not scripturally based for what the scriptures want to save your soul. So if it ain't in the book, why are we using it? And I could go controversial and say the Ethiopians have more than 66 books, and they have the complete Bible, which is known as, the oldest Bible. But you guys aren't ready for that question or that commentary, because you haven't even read your full Bible. You haven't even started on the 66, a lot of you. And, read that, then you can make your comments, and then we can go have that conversation. We don't debate, because the scriptures talk about not debating either. We're not going to argue no scripture. We're just going to say our opinion. So when you don't get a response, don't be upset. Just, we're letting you vent like I'm venting, and you can share this venting hour with somebody else. It will change their life. At least they say, never thought of it like that. Keep in mind, wasn't rude, didn't have to name call. It's just, we got to do better, because we're in that back of the book. We're in that back of the book, people. So be blessed.
Hi everyone. Have you ever been curious about visiting Africa? Which African country were you interested in? Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, South Africa, Ethiopia? Which country are you interested in? My good friend, KELLEN COLEMAN, came up with a course called My First Trip to Africa that'll guide you through this process. It's only $20, and in this course you'll learn about passports, visas, vaccinations that you need before you go there, as well as a budget, how much the trip is going to cost. He also talks about what you should pack, what you should take with you, how you should travel on a budget. Did you know that $100 is worth 1,000 South African rand and over 10,000 Kenyan shillings? So imagine what you can do with $100 back home. I say back home because I'm from Sudan, I'm African, I already know how it's like. I know that, when you convert Canadian and American money, it goes a long way when you're traveling across Africa. So if you're curious, if Africa is a place that you've always wanted to go, always wanted to move there, KELLEN KASH is the person to ask. Check out the course. There's a little preview you can listen to before you actually purchase it. If you're interested in this course, visit www.diversifiedgame.com. Don't miss out.